By the time I got to my mother's house, my sister had already changed the locks. I was standing on the front porch with 2 paper grocery bags in my arms, one with soup, one with adult diapers, and my key hit the deadbolt like it belonged to a different address. Through the beveled glass by the door, I could see the hallway lamp on and my mother's blue walker where it always sat. My house key worked on that lock for 19 years. That night it scraped and turned uselessly, and before I could knock, Dana opened the door 3 inches and looked at me like I was a salesman. "You can leave that stuff there," she said. I remember staring at the brass chain she'd fastened across the frame. My mother was somewhere inside. I could hear the television low in the den, one of those game shows she liked to half-watch while pretending to read. Dana kept her body angled so I couldn't see past her. "I have a key," I said. "You had a key." It was one of those lines that only sounds strong if you've rehearsed it. Dana had. Her lipstick was too careful for a Tuesday night, and she was wearing the expression she used when she wanted to look calm in front of other people. Controlled. Reasonable. The injured party. "Move," I told her. "I'm not here to argue. I'm here to see Mom. You're not seeing her tonight." That was the first moment I knew this had gone past family friction and into something planned. My name is Elias Mercer. I was 48 then, divorced, a compliance officer for a regional bank in Columbus, Ohio, and the person who had been handling most of my mother's life for the previous 3 years. Not because I was a saint, not because I was the favorite, mostly because I lived 22 minutes away and Dana lived in Charlotte until 6 months earlier, when she came back to help. Help is one of those words that can hide a lot of damage. Our mother, Lorraine, had turned 78 that spring. She had early Parkinson's, decent days and bad days, and a stubborn streak that had only sharpened as her hands got less reliable. She still knew exactly who everyone was. She still balanced her own checkbook in this neat, slanted handwriting that looked like it belonged to a schoolteacher from 1964. But stairs were getting harder. Cooking was harder. Showering alone was becoming a negotiation. After my father died, I started taking her to appointments, fixing things around the house, sorting medication, handling insurance calls, and making sure she didn't let every charity in the country draft $50 from her account because a teenager on the phone said veterans and "bless you, ma'am." Dana called a lot during those years. She sounded concerned. She sent flowers. She posted old family pictures on Mother's Day with captions about the queen who raised us. Then she'd get off the phone and go back to a life that didn't involve cleaning up after our mother had frozen in the bathroom at 2 in the morning because her legs wouldn't cooperate. I'm not saying that to punish her. I'm saying it because facts matter, and facts were the only thing that saved me later. "Where is she?" I asked through the chain. "Resting." "Dana, she doesn't need to be upset." That word caught in me. Upset. Like I was the disturbance. Like I was some unstable outsider with a grievance, and not the son who had taken his lunch breaks in cardiology waiting rooms and spent Saturdays arguing with Medicare billing. I set the grocery bags down carefully so I wouldn't throw them. "Tell Mom I'm here." Dana folded her arms. "She knows." From inside the house, I heard the television click off. Then I heard my mother's voice. "Ellie." Just one word, but weak and muffled, not because she was confused, but because someone had moved her farther back into the house. Dana glanced over her shoulder. It was small, almost nothing, but I saw it. I stepped forward, and the chain snapped tight. "Open the door." "You need to stop doing this," she said. "Doing what?" "Acting like you own everything." I laughed once, not because it was funny, but because I suddenly understood I was behind in a conversation she'd been having without me for months. "Open the door, Dana." "No. And after tonight, don't come by unless I say it's okay." There are moments in your life where anger would be easier than clarity. Anger gives you somewhere to stand. Clarity makes you feel the floor drop out. I stood there looking at my sister's face and realized she believed she could say that to me because some other step had already been taken. "What did you do?" I asked. Her expression tightened for half a second. "Fear, maybe." Then it was gone. "Mom changed some things. That's all." "What things?" "She's tired, Elias. Tired of being managed. Tired of you treating her like she's incompetent. Tired of you using her house like it's your little command center." I had never raised my voice to my mother in my life. Never called her incompetent. Never taken a cent from her. Every receipt from the pharmacy, every grocery run, every contractor deposit I ever advanced and got repaid for was scanned, dated, and sitting in a cloud folder because that was how my brain worked. At the time, I didn't know that habit would become the hinge everything turned on. I said, very evenly, "Put Mom on the phone right now. She's not taking your calls tonight." Dana started closing the door. I put my hand flat against the wood before it shut. "If you close this door on me, I'm calling the police." "Then call them." That threw me, not because it was bold, but because it was too ready. I called anyway. A patrol car came 26 minutes later. Dana had the chain off by then and a fresh face on, the one she used on nurses and men in uniform. She stepped onto the porch first, speaking softly, one hand at her chest. By the time the officers talked to me, she had already framed it as a family disagreement about an elderly parent who needed calm. They asked to see my mother. Dana let them in. I stood outside under the porch light like a suspect in my own family. One of the officers came back out and told me my mother said she was fine and wanted to rest. He said it apologetically, which made it worse. "Did she say that in front of my sister?" I asked. He gave me the kind of look professionals use when they aren't allowed to say yes. I drove home with both grocery bags in the passenger seat. The soup had tipped over in the container and leaked into the paper. I threw it away in my sink and stood there longer than I needed to, hands braced on the counter, trying to make one clean thought out of what had just happened. At 9:14 that night, my mother called from her landline. Not her cell. The landline in the kitchen, the one Dana never used because she said it made the house feel old. "Ellie," she said quietly, "don't come back tonight." I sat down at my table. "Mom, are you all right?" A pause. Then, "She says I get confused when I'm tired." My mother had a dry sense of humor even on bad days. The fact that her voice shook under it scared me more than if she'd cried. "What did you sign?" Another pause. I could hear the refrigerator humming at her end. "I don't know exactly." That sentence changed the temperature in the room. She spoke in careful pieces after that, as if she was reaching into fog. Dana had brought over a man from some law office the week before. Said they needed to update paperwork. Said everything was outdated and dangerous, and if something happened, the bank could freeze accounts, the hospital could ignore family, the house could end up in probate for years. It had all been said very fast. My mother remembered initialing pages, signing one document on the dining room table and another in the den because her hand cramped. She remembered Dana saying, "Just trust me." "Did you ask to call me?" I said I wanted to wait. "Did she let you read it?" I tried. My mother inhaled shakily. She said, "You'd be angry because you can't stand not controlling things." There it was. The narrative. Not just that I was inconvenient, that I was a threat to my own mother's independence, that if she kept me out, she was protecting herself. I closed my eyes for a second. "Mom, listen to me. Tomorrow morning, I'm taking a vacation day. I'm going to find out exactly what she had you sign. She said you'd make trouble." "I am going to make trouble," I said, "but only if she earned it." I heard a sound then, floorboards or a door hinge, and my mother's voice changed. "I have to go. Mom, I love you, Ellie." The line went dead. I didn't sleep much. By 7:30 the next morning, I was at the county recorder's office website with coffee going cold beside my keyboard. Most people have no reason to search property transfers before work. I did. There was a deed recorded 3 business days earlier. Quitclaim deed. Lorraine Mercer to Dana Whitcomb. For $1 and other valuable consideration. I read it 3 times. The house my father had nearly paid off before pancreatic cancer took him. The house my mother still lived in. The house she had always said would be split evenly after she was gone. Not because she wanted to keep score, but because she believed leaving things clean was its own kindness. That house had been transferred to my sister for $1. At 8:12, I called my friend Martin Feld, an elder law attorney I knew from the bank's charity board. I wasn't close to him, but I trusted him. By 8:40, I was in his office with a printed copy of the deed, a yellow legal pad, and the feeling that if I let myself get emotional, I'd start missing details. Martin read the deed, then looked at me over his glasses. "When was this signed?" I gave him the date. "When was it recorded?" 3 days later. "Any power of attorney in place?" There was one from 2022 naming me for medical and finances if she became incapacitated. "Drawn up properly." I have a copy. His eyebrows went up. "And this new attorney you've never heard of prepared a deed transferring the house to your sister while your mother still lives there." "That's what it looks like." Martin leaned back. "It may be legal. It may also be garbage. Capacity matters. Undue influence matters. The timing matters. The witnesses matter. Who notarized it matters. A lot matters. He asked me questions in a precise, almost boring sequence, and that steadied me. Who handled bills? Me. Who attended appointments? Mostly me. Any diagnosis of dementia? No. Cognitive fluctuations? Some slowness on bad medication days, but she knew her finances. Had Dana isolated her recently? Yes. Any major change in spending? I wasn't sure yet. Access to accounts? My mother had insisted on keeping them in her own name, but I had online viewing access on one checking account to help monitor bill pay. That was when I saw the first thing that made my stomach tighten for real. Over the previous 5 weeks, there had been 4 cashier's checks from my mother's account, 2 for $8,500, 1 for $11,200, 1 for $6,000, all payable to Dana Whitcomb. I hadn't caught them because the statement cycle hadn't closed and the alerts on that account only triggered above $15,000. My mother almost never wrote checks over $300. Martin watched my face change. What? I turned the laptop toward him. He was quiet for a moment. Do not call your sister yet. I wasn't planning to. Good. People like this rush when they think they've been noticed. People like this. You'd be amazed how often it's a son or daughter with a story about helping. They start with access, then urgency, then paperwork. That should have made me feel righteous. It didn't. It made me sick. Because once you recognize a pattern, old scenes rearrange themselves. The first incident had seemed too petty to hold on to at the time. 2 months after Dana came back to Ohio, I had stopped by after work and found 3 framed family photos missing from the piano in the living room. My parents' wedding picture. A studio portrait of me and Dana as kids in stiff Easter clothes. One of my children with my mother at the beach when they were small. In their place was a framed quote in looping script about daughters being their mother's first best friend. I asked my mother where the pictures went. She looked embarrassed and said Dana was refreshing the room. Dana laughed when I mentioned it and said, "You don't have to take everything personally, Elias." The second was at a neurology appointment in March. I had always gone in with my mother because her tremor got worse when she was tired and she sometimes missed medication changes. That day Dana arrived early and intercepted us in the parking garage. She told the nurse only one family member should come back because too many opinions overwhelmed our mother. It was phrased politely enough that it sounded almost reasonable. I ended up in the waiting room for 40 minutes while Dana came out with a printout of medications and a look of victory she didn't bother hiding. The third was money, though I didn't know it then. My mother mentioned over coffee one Sunday that she was thinking of helping Dana get settled. Dana had divorced badly, carried credit card debt, and liked to describe every financial consequence of her own decisions as a season of rebuilding. I asked what helping meant. My mother shrugged and said Dana needed breathing room. I told her it was her money, but she should be careful about large gifts and call me before signing anything. She got annoyed in that dignified way older people do when they think concern is a disguise for instruction. The fourth was 6 weeks before the locks changed. Dana suggested, out of nowhere, that maybe it was time to discuss assisted living before a crisis forces it. My mother stiffened. My father had promised her she would never be pushed out of her house just because she got old. I said there were home care options first. Dana gave me a long look and said, "Of course you'd want to keep things exactly as they are." At the time, I thought that was about control. I didn't understand that she was irritated because the house itself was already part of the plan. By noon, Martin had drafted a list for me. Get full bank records. Pull any new power of attorney, deed preparation records, and notary information. Document every caregiving date I had, every doctor visit, every payment, every email. If my mother was being isolated, we'd need to move carefully. If the documents were bad, moving slowly could still cost us the house. Then he asked a question that seemed minor until later. Did your mother ever change lawyers after your father died? No. She used the same local estate attorney they'd had since 2009. Name? I told him. He looked it up while I sat there. Retired 18 months earlier. Practice closed. So who drew this up? He said quietly. And who referred your sister? I drove from Martin's office to my mother's street, but stayed around the corner instead of parking in front. I hated that. It felt sneaky and adolescent. But if Dana had already changed the locks in the deed, I didn't want to walk into whatever performance she had prepared next. At 117, an unfamiliar sedan pulled into the driveway. Not a contractor. Too clean. A silver Lexus with temporary tags. A man in a tan blazer got out carrying a leather portfolio. He was in the house 11 minutes. When he came out, he looked annoyed. I took a picture of the plate. Then, because luck sometimes arrives looking ordinary, my phone rang. It was Mrs. Alvarez from across the street. She had known my mother for 20 years and possessed the softest voice in Franklin County. She also noticed everything. "I saw your car," she said. "Are you nearby?" "Yes." A pause. "I have something you should hear, but not over the phone." 10 minutes later, I was in her sunroom with a sweating glass of iced tea in front of me I never touched. She sat across from me, hands folded on the table. "Last Thursday," she said, "your sister asked if I would come over and witness some paperwork for your mother." I didn't interrupt. She told me it was insurance paperwork. Your mother looked tired. That's all I'll say. Not confused exactly. Just tired in a way that made me uncomfortable. "Did you sign?" "No." The first real breath I'd taken all day left me in one piece. She got irritated, Mrs. Alvarez said. Said they had another witness. The man with her, not the notary, the other man. He kept pushing the page toward your mother. I didn't like it, so I left. "Do you know his name?" "I heard your sister call him Brent." I wrote it down. Then Mrs. Alvarez opened a drawer beside her chair and handed me a folded piece of paper. When I got home, I realized your mother had tucked this into my purse when she hugged me goodbye. It was one sheet torn from a yellow notepad in my mother's careful, slanted handwriting. "Call Elias. Don't sign yet. She won't listen." My mouth went dry. The note was dated in the upper corner. Same day as the deed. That was the hidden thing, the quiet fact no speech could beat. Not anger, not suspicion. A handwritten note from my mother, made before the transfer was recorded, saying exactly what she wanted and what she did not. I looked up at Mrs. Alvarez. "Why didn't you call me then?" Her eyes filled immediately. "I did. Twice. It went to voicemail. Then Dana came over that evening and told me you and your mother had had a fight and that I should stay out of private matters." I checked my phone. 2 missed calls from a number I didn't know, buried among work notifications from that day. A person can forgive himself for a lot of things as he gets older. Busy mistakes. Misread tones. The wrong word at dinner. What is harder to forgive is missing the knock when someone was trying to get out. I slid the note back into its fold with both hands, careful not to damage it. "Would you be willing to say all of that formally?" I asked. Mrs. Alvarez nodded. "If it protects your mother, yes." At 4:05, my sister called me for the first time all day. Her tone was bright, almost bored. "You need to stop circling the neighborhood. It's upsetting Mom." I let 3 seconds pass. "You had a witness walk out on you," I said. "That's a problem." Silence. Then, carefully, "I don't know what you think you're doing. I know exactly what I'm doing now. You always need to make this ugly." "No, Dana." Ugly was changing the locks on our mother. Ugly was moving a deed through while she was asking someone to call me. Another beat of silence, longer this time. When she spoke again, her voice had gone flat. "You should be very careful with accusations. And you should be very careful with forged certainty." It wasn't forged. I didn't say signature. That landed. I heard her breathing change. She recovered quickly. "Mom wanted me to have the house because I'm the one here. I was there before you unpacked a single box. You were there to supervise. There's a difference." Then she said something that at the time sounded like a taunt and later turned out to be an admission. She was tired of owing you. I stood in my kitchen holding the phone and finally understood the machinery. Dana had spent months translating dependents into debt. Every ride, every doctor visit, every grocery run, every form I'd helped fill out had been recast in my mother's mind not as family love, but as a balance she was failing to repay. Give the house to the daughter. Square the account. Relieve the guilt. It was manipulative enough to work because it was built from real vulnerability. "You know what she's terrified of," I said. "And you used it. I'm done with this conversation." "So am I. I'm filing in the morning." She laughed once, low and mean. "By then it won't matter." Then she hung up. I called Martin immediately. He answered on the second ring. "Tell me you've got something." "I've got a neighbor witness and a handwritten note from my mother saying call Elias. Don't sign yet." He exhaled hard. "Good. Very good. There's more," I said. "Dana just told me. By then it won't matter." What does she mean? I was about to say I didn't know when another call came through. Unknown number. Local. I answered. A woman introduced herself as a social worker from Riverside Geriatric Behavioral Unit. For one disorienting second, I thought she had the wrong number. Then she said, Your mother was admitted this afternoon for observation after concerns were raised about agitation and impaired judgment. I'm calling because your sister listed herself as primary family contact, but your mother is asking for you now." Everything in me went still. Who raised the concerns? I asked. A pause. I'm not authorized to discuss that over the phone. I already knew. Dana hadn't just taken the house. She was trying to have our mother declared incompetent before I could challenge a single document. I was at Riverside in 14 minutes. The woman at the desk on the geriatric unit had the tired, over-careful expression of someone who spends her day absorbing family panic. She asked my name, checked a screen, then looked at me in a way that told me there had already been notes added to my mother's chart before I arrived. "Your sister is listed as primary contact," she said, "but your mother has requested to see you. I'm her son." She gave a small nod, like that explained part of the problem without solving any of it. Then she handed me a visitor badge and said a nurse would bring me back. Riverside smelled like disinfectant and weak coffee. On the walk down the corridor, I passed 3 closed doors and one old man in slipper socks staring at a television mounted too high on the wall. There's a particular humiliation to these places when you know someone you love does not belong there. Not because mental health care is shameful, because institutions flatten context. A person becomes a room number, a chart, a concern reported by family. My mother was sitting upright in a vinyl chair by the window when I walked in. She was still wearing the same pale green cardigan she'd had on the last time I saw her through the beveled glass at the front door. Her hair was brushed, but badly. Dana always did things that looked correct at a distance. When she saw me, the composure in her face broke. "Ellie." I crossed the room and took both her hands. They were cold. "Did they hurt you?" "No," she shook her head. "No, nothing like that. They just kept asking me the same questions in different ways. What day is it? Who's president? How much cash I keep in the house? If I understood my property. They made me feel foolish." I pulled a chair close and sat facing her. "Why are you here?" My mother glanced at the door before answering. "Dana told the doctor I was having spells, that I was paranoid, that I accused her of stealing because I was confused." There it was, plain and ugly. "Did you tell them that wasn't true?" "Yes." Her mouth tightened. Then I forgot the name of one of my medications, and they all looked at each other. I've worked around regulations and internal investigations long enough to know how narratives harden. Once a file starts leaning one way, every neutral fact gets read through it. A frightened 78-year-old woman forgetting a dosage under fluorescent lights becomes evidence. A daughter who sounds concerned becomes credible by tone alone. I took the folded note from my inside pocket and placed it in her lap. "Do you remember this?" She looked down, and her eyes sharpened in a way I hadn't seen all week. "Yes." "You wrote it?" "Yes." "You gave it to Mrs. Alvarez?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because I didn't want to sign." She looked up at me then, direct and steady. "I wanted to wait for you." That mattered more than almost anything. I asked if anyone from the hospital had recorded her saying that. She said no. They had asked broad questions. No one had sat and listened. "Then listen to me now," I said. "Tomorrow, Martin Feld is coming here. He's an attorney. Not Dana's attorney. Ours. You are not signing anything else. You are not agreeing to any transfer, evaluation, or placement without him and without me present. Do you understand?" My mother nodded. Then, very quietly, she said, "I think I already signed more than I knew." I felt that in the base of my throat. "What more?" "A bank paper, maybe. Dana said it was so she could help with bills if I got sick. There was a card too. She said to make things easier. The account trail." I stepped into the hall and called Martin. He told me not to argue with staff, not to make accusations in a corridor, and not to let my sister bait me into a scene that would land in the chart as family volatility. He said he'd file for an emergency hearing first thing in the morning to challenge the deed, freeze further transfers if possible, and petition for independent capacity review and temporary protective orders. Then he said, "Get the nurse manager and ask one question only. Is your mother here voluntarily or under a hold?" She was voluntary. That changed everything. It meant my mother could request discharge unless a physician converted her status. When I asked the nurse manager, she looked irritated that I understood enough to ask it. She said discharge would depend on physician assessment in the morning. Then note in the chart. I told her, calm as I could manage, that the patient states she was pressured into signing property documents she did not understand, that she is contesting those documents, and that she requests no legal or financial decisions be made based on this admission without independent counsel. People listen differently when you give them a sentence they can chart. Dana arrived 20 minutes later. I heard her before I saw her, heels quick on the tile, voice already tuned to concern. When she turned into the doorway, she stopped for half a beat. Not because I was there, because my mother was holding my hand. "Mom," she said, with a softness so practiced it almost qualified as skill. I was worried sick. My mother didn't let go of me. Dana looked at me. "You shouldn't be here upsetting her." She asked for me. Dana smiled without warmth. Of course she did. That's the pattern. I stood up, moved into the hallway, and she followed. I did not want this conversation in front of our mother. The corridor lights made everyone look worse. Dana's makeup had settled into the lines around her mouth. For the first time since this started, she looked less triumphant than tired. Not guilty, just strained, like someone who had been carrying too many lies at once. "You called in a competency concern," I said. "I called in a wellness concern. You're trying to establish incapacity. She needs help. She needs you to stop stripping parts off her life." Dana's face hardened. "You don't get to say that after the way you've hovered over her for years." Hovering is bringing groceries and taking her to neurology. This is different. She gave me the house. She signed a deed after tucking a note into a neighbor's purse saying not to let her sign yet. That hit. Not wide, just enough. Dana recovered quickly. You have no idea what she understood in that moment. I know enough. She lowered her voice. "You think this is about greed because that's simpler for you than the truth." "What truth?" "That she was tired of you making her feel small." I stared at her. "You really built the whole thing on that." "It wasn't built. It was there." That was Dana's talent. She rarely invented from nothing. She found a bruise and kept pressing until it became a story. Had my mother sometimes felt embarrassed needing help? Of course. Had I occasionally been too brisk, too practical, too focused on getting through the checklist? Probably. Real life always gives a manipulator enough material if they're patient. "You took money too," I said. "Cashier's checks." Her jaw moved once. "Mom wanted to help me. $34,200. It was a loan. To be repaid when. She said not everything has to go through you. I'll ask again in court." The word court changed her breathing. That told me something else. She had expected emotion, not process. She thought if she could keep me angry enough, she could keep me sloppy. Instead, I said, "Who is Brent?" Nothing in her face for a second. Then, "I don't know. Mrs. Alvarez does." That one she couldn't cover fast enough. Brent, as it turned out by the next afternoon, was not a lawyer. He was a commission-based senior transition consultant, which sounded respectable until you looked closely and realized it mostly meant he steered older homeowners toward sales, downsizing, and quick-turn dispositions through a web of friendly referrals. The silver Lexus, the portfolio, the pressure. He had connected Dana to the notary and the document preparer. Not an attorney. A paralegal working remotely through an online service in another county. Legal enough on paper to scare ordinary people. Fragile enough under scrutiny to come apart. By 9 the next morning, Martin had filed emergency motions in probate court. He moved faster than anyone I've ever known, not theatrically, just efficiently, like a man who had spent 20 years cleaning up after other people's appetites. He got an expedited hearing for the following day on temporary restraining relief, document preservation, and independent evaluation of my mother's capacity around the time of the transfer. He also got something better. My mother's longtime primary care physician faxed over records showing no diagnosis of dementia, no adjudication of incapacity, and office notes from just 6 weeks earlier describing her as oriented, financially aware, and able to discuss estate preferences clearly. Not perfect cognition, but not the helpless confusion Dana had been selling. Then the bank records came in. The cashier's checks were bad enough. The debit card activity was worse. My mother almost never used her debit card for anything but the pharmacy drive-thru and the grocery store 2 miles from our house. Over the previous month, it had been used for furniture, a boutique hotel in Indianapolis, 2 spa charges, and an electronics store. All purchases in Dana's orbit. All help apparently. The hidden leverage kept growing. But the thing that broke it open came from somewhere smaller. At the hearing, the probate courtroom was colder than it needed to be. Beige walls, cheap wood, a flag in the corner that looked tired from too many family wars passing beneath it. My mother was there in a wheelchair because the hospital had discharged her that morning into my care pending follow-up. Martin had arranged transportation straight from Riverside. Dana came in with a lawyer in a Navy suit and an expression meant to communicate hurt more than fear. The judge, a woman named Rosenthal, had no patience for theater, which was the best thing that could have happened to us. Martin presented the deed timeline, the handwritten note, the neighbor's statement, the bank activity, the sudden isolation, the competency admission initiated by the beneficiary of the transfer, and the fact that the deed had been prepared outside my mother's long-standing legal channels. Dana's lawyer argued family misunderstanding, caregiver conflict, and my mother's alleged desire to reward the daughter who had recently returned home. Then Judge Rosenthal asked my mother directly, "Mrs. Mercer, when you signed the papers transferring your home, did you understand you were giving the property solely to your daughter?" My mother sat very still. "No," she said. "I thought I was signing papers so she could help me if I got sick." Dana looked down at her lap. The judge asked another question. "If you had understood that you were giving your house away outright that day, would you have done it?" No simple answers. Clean answers. Better than any speech I could have made for her. Then Martin called Mrs. Alvarez. She testified gently, without embellishment, exactly the way trustworthy people do. She described being asked to witness paperwork, seeing my mother tired and uncomfortable, declining to sign, and discovering the handwritten note after she got home. Martin entered the note into the record. Dana's lawyer tried to chip at it. Maybe Lorraine changed her mind later. Maybe she was only anxious. Maybe she didn't understand the note's significance. Then Martin did one thing I still appreciate because it was so quiet. He asked the clerk to project a copy of the deed. Then he put my mother's 2022 power of attorney beside it. "Your Honor, note the signature style." At first glance they looked similar. Same name, same slant. But once you saw it, you couldn't unsee it. On every legitimate signature, my mother looped the L in Lorraine wide and low because of the stiffness in her hand. On the deed, the L was narrow and upright, like someone imitating her name from memory rather than muscle. Martin didn't overplay it. He simply said, "We are requesting forensic review." That was the stronger proof, the thing Dana had not anticipated because greed makes people impatient. She had rushed past persuasion into production. Dana's lawyer objected. The judge overruled him. Temporary restraining order granted. No sale, no encumbrance, no transfer, no removal of property from the residence, and no further use of disputed financial authority pending review. Independent guardian ad litem appointed for my mother. Forensic document examination authorized. Full evidentiary hearing set. It wasn't final, but power had shifted. Outside the courtroom, Dana finally dropped the wounded sister act. "You did this to her," she hissed, dragging her through court. I looked at her for a long second. "No, I just brought people into the room who don't have to love you to tell when you're lying." That would have been a satisfying place to leave it, but real consequences take paperwork, time, and the slow grind of systems. Over the next 7 weeks, the rest came out. The online paralegal service disavowed any attorney-client relationship beyond document processing. The notary admitted under subpoena that she had not been present for every signature despite certifying the acknowledgement. Brent, suddenly less polished when questioned under oath, said Dana told him her brother was trying to force mom into a home and that urgent transfer was needed to protect the property. He also admitted he expected a referral fee if the house later sold through one of his contacts. The forensic examiner concluded that at least one signature on the deed was highly probably not authentic and that another had signs of tracing hesitation. Not a dramatic TV conclusion. Better, real, technical, hard to talk around. The bank opened an internal elder financial exploitation review once Martin sent the court filings. They froze Dana's access and flagged the transactions. Because of my job, I had been careful not to touch anything through back channels. That mattered. Everything came through proper requests. Clean hands matter when families get ugly. By early summer, the court voided the deed. The judge's order was dry, almost bland. Undue influence, defective execution, serious concerns regarding authenticity and capacity. Property title restored fully to Lorraine Mercer. Temporary financial restrictions made permanent pending a supervised accounting. That order sat on my kitchen table for a long time after I got home. because bland language can carry an enormous amount of justice if it arrives in the right envelope. The money took longer. Dana had to account for the cashier's checks and card use. Her explanations changed 3 times. First gifts, then loans, then reimbursement for care, travel, and household contributions she could not document because they had never existed. In the end, she signed a civil settlement requiring repayment over time, secured partly by the condo she had rushed to rent downtown with money that was not hers. Criminal charges were discussed. The prosecutor's office reviewed the file. My mother, after a lot of thought, did not want her daughter indicted if repayment and court restrictions held. Some people would call that weakness. I don't. At her age, peace had a different value. The practical consequence was sharper anyway. Dana lost access, lost credibility, lost the ability to narrate herself as the dutiful daughter. The guardian ad litem recommended structured contact only, no control over finances, no unsupervised document handling, and no role in housing decisions. That language sounds clinical. In family terms, it meant the door closed. After the final hearing, Dana asked to speak to me alone in the courthouse hallway. I almost said no. Then I saw something in her face I hadn't seen before. Not remorse exactly, more like the exhaustion of a person who had reached the edge of a story and found no applause waiting. We stood beside a vending machine humming under fluorescent light, an ordinary place for something that had consumed nearly 5 months of my life. She was going to leave me with nothing, Dana said. Our mother was alive, sitting 40 feet away with a paper cup of water. And there it was anyway, the real confession. Not fear for mom, not help. Inheritance panic delivered early. She was going to split it evenly, I said. You already got everything that mattered. I looked at her. You mean trust? No, she snapped. I mean time, access, her dependence, the role. You got to be the good one. It hit me then that Dana had been competing in an event no one else had entered. She had mistaken caregiving for status, reliability for image, closeness for victory. Maybe she'd been doing that since we were children. Maybe I just hadn't needed to notice before. She needed a son, I said, not a witness. Dana's eyes went bright, but she didn't cry. She was too controlled for that in public. I made mistakes, she said. No, you built a process. That was the last private conversation we've had. My mother came home 2 days later. Not alone. With new locks of her own choosing, cameras at the front and back doors, a neutral home health aide 3 afternoons a week, and estate documents redone properly through Martin's office with an independent capacity assessment attached so no one could ever run this play again. She kept the house. She amended her estate plan, not to punish Dana theatrically, but to protect herself practically. Dana's share was reduced, structured, and placed under conditions. Mine too, at my request. I didn't want to be the beneficiary of the lesson. I wanted the lesson finished. For a while, my mother apologized to me more than she needed to. I stopped her every time, because the truth was, she had been manipulated where she was most human. Age, pride, fear of dependence, fear of becoming a burden. None of that made her foolish. It made her reachable. I had my own peace to own. Not the theft, not the deed, but the fact that I had mistaken competence for safety. I thought because I kept receipts, knew doctors' names, and showed up consistently, the ground under us was stable. It wasn't. Families can be attacked from inside with words that sound like care. A few months later, on a cool October afternoon, I sat with my mother on her back porch while a yard service cut the grass she used to insist I mow myself. She had a blanket over her knees and a mug of tea that had gone half cold because she was talking more than drinking. I should have called you sooner, she said. Yes. She smiled a little at that. She appreciated honesty when it wasn't sharpened. I was embarrassed, she said. That may be the silliest part. It's not silly. She made it sound as if accepting help from you all those years had put me in debt. And I hated that idea so much I wanted to erase it. I looked out at the yard. You never owed me for any of it. I know that now. I let that sit between us for a moment, because sometimes the only respectful thing to do with a hard truth is not rush past it. Then she said, Will you ever speak to your sister again? I considered the question carefully. Maybe at a funeral, I said. Maybe in a hospital. Maybe nowhere that requires trust. My mother nodded. She didn't defend Dana. That mattered too. The last piece of it came in a plain envelope 11 months after the locks had first changed. Final repayment notice. Settlement current. Case administratively closed. I filed it in a drawer with the court order, the forged deed copy, and the yellow note my mother had hidden in Mrs. Alvarez's purse. I still have that note. Not because I enjoy revisiting any of this. I don't. I keep it because it reminds me how quiet the turning point really was. Not some grand confrontation. Not a speech. A torn piece of paper from a woman whose hand shook, asking for one thing clearly before someone else decided her life for her. My mother is 80 now. Slower. More tired. Still sharp in the ways that matter. I still take her to appointments, though she now insists on buying my lunch after as if we've entered some negotiated peace over care. Mrs. Alvarez still watches the street from her sunroom like a benevolent intelligence agency. Martin still sends Christmas cards with handwriting no one should have to decipher professionally. Dana lives 2 states away again. We hear about her indirectly. A job in sales. Another move. A story, I'm sure, in which she was misunderstood by difficult people and punished for caring too much. I no longer feel the need to correct narratives I don't live inside. What I wanted in the beginning was justice with a clean emotional ending. What I got was something more adult. Paperwork. Boundaries. Repayment. Distance. A mother protected. A sister revealed. No miracle. No reconciliation dinner. No dramatic apology on the porch. Just the house staying in the right name. The accounts back under the right hands. And the front door opening when I use my own key.